When Lewis Hamilton sat down in his Monaco penthouse and opened an old dusty box from 1995, he had no idea his hands were shaking while holding a piece of paper that would change everything. Inside that yellowed envelope was a note. Just one sentence. 23 words that revealed a secret his father had kept for almost 30 years. For Anthony Hamilton and his son's racing dreams, £2,500. Pay it forward when you can. R.C. Lewis stared at those letters. R.C. Who was R.C.? And why did this stranger give his dad money when Lewis was just 8 years old? His father finally told him the truth. A man named Raymond Chen had handed him an envelope on a train in 1995. Inside was £2,500 in cash. That money bought the go-kart parts that started Lewis Hamilton's journey to becoming a 7-time Formula One world champion. Without Raymond Chen, there would be no Lewis Hamilton racing career, no championships, no glory, nothing. But here's what made Lewis's hands shake even more. When he hired a private investigator to find Raymond, what they discovered was shocking. Raymond had given away that money when his own 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, was dying from cancer. That £2,500 was his emergency savings, money he needed for his daughter's treatment. Raymond chose to believe in an 8-year-old stranger's dream instead of keeping his safety net. Lewis knew he had to find this man. He had to thank him, and he had to repay him. But how do you repay someone who gave everything when they had nothing to give? After searching for weeks, Lewis finally found Raymond living alone in a lighthouse in Cornwall. The old man had disappeared in 1998, trying to escape painful memories, and he had no idea that the little boy he helped had become one of the greatest race car drivers in history. When Lewis knocked on that lighthouse door, Raymond almost fainted. He couldn't believe Lewis Hamilton was standing in front of him. But what Lewis did next? What he revealed as repayment? Nobody saw it coming. Not Raymond. Not his daughter Sophie. Not anyone. The way Lewis Hamilton repaid this debt will make you cry. It will restore your faith in humanity, and it will prove that one person's choice to believe in a stranger can change the entire world. Stay with us until the end to discover exactly how Lewis repaid the man who made everything possible. Because the answer is more beautiful and more powerful than you could ever imagine. This is the story of a £2,500 loan that became a multi-million-dollar legacy of hope. The afternoon sun poured through the tall windows of Lewis Hamilton's Monaco penthouse. Boxes were stacked everywhere. Old racing helmets, faded photographs, trophies that didn't fit in the display cases anymore. Lewis sat on the hardwood floor in his jeans and t-shirt, surrounded by 30 years of memories. His assistant had asked him 3 times if he wanted help sorting through everything. Each time, Lewis said no. This felt personal, private. He opened another cardboard box. Inside were his father's old papers from the Stevenage days. Bank statements from 1994. Racing entry forms with his childhood handwriting. A program from his first proper karting championship. Then he saw it. A yellowed envelope tucked between 2 racing magazines. The paper had turned brown at the edges, so someone had written on it in blue ink, "Important. Keep safe." Lewis's hands trembled slightly as he picked it up. The envelope wasn't sealed. He pulled out a single piece of lined notebook paper, folded in half. The handwriting was neat and careful. The date at the top read March 15th, 1995. Lewis's breath caught in his throat as he read, "For Anthony Hamilton and his son's racing dreams, £2,500. Pay it forward when you can. R.C." That was it. One sentence. 23 words that changed everything. Louis stared at the letters RC for a long moment. His mind raced backward through time, searching through memories almost 30 years old. He remembered being 8 years old. He remembered his dad working all the time, so tired he'd fall asleep in his chair after dinner. He remembered the tiny flat in Stevenage where they lived. When he remembered wanting to race so badly it hurt, but he didn't remember anyone named RC. Louis pulled out his phone and called his father. "Dad," he said when Anthony answered, "I'm going through the old boxes. I found something." "What kind of something?" Anthony's voice was warm and curious. "An envelope. A note about £2,500 from 1995. Someone with the initials RC. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long that Louis thought the call had dropped. "Dad? Where did you find that?" Anthony's voice had changed. It sounded distant now, emotional. "In one of your old boxes. Who is RC?" Another pause. "Raymond Chen," Anthony said softly. "I haven't thought about that name in years, maybe decades." Louis stood up and walked to the window. Below, the Mediterranean Sea sparkled like diamonds. Luxury yachts floated in the harbor. This world felt a million miles away from Stevenage in 1995. "Tell me about him," Louis said. "He was a man I met on the train," Anthony began. "I was working as a conductor back then. Raymond rode my route every day. Always polite, always reading racing magazines. We started talking." Louis listened, pressing the phone against his ear. "I never asked him for money, Louis. I want you to understand that. I never asked anyone for handouts. But Raymond, he just knew somehow. He knew we were struggling. He knew you had talent. One day, he handed me that envelope and walked away before I could refuse it." "What did you use it for?" Louis asked, though part of him already knew. "Your kart engine had blown up the week before," Anthony said. "We needed parts, new components. The sponsorship letters had all come back rejected. And I was working 3 jobs, and it still wasn't enough. That money, Louis, that money bought the parts that let you race that season. The season where you started winning. The season where people finally noticed you." Louis felt something heavy settle in his chest. His entire career, all 7 world championships, all the victories, all the glory, had started with a stranger's kindness. "Dad, do you know where he is now? Do you have his address? A phone number?" "No," Anthony said quietly. "After we moved and things got busy with your racing career, we lost touch. I tried to find him once, maybe 10 years ago, to say thank you properly, but I couldn't track him down. It was like he disappeared." Louis looked down at the note in his hand. The paper was so old it felt fragile, but the words were still clear. "Pay it forward when you can." "I need to find him, Dad," Louis said firmly. "I need to find Raymond Chen." "Louis, that was almost 30 years ago. He might not even be—" "I don't care how long it takes," Louis interrupted. "This man believed in me when nobody else did. He gave us money when he probably didn't have much himself. I need to find him, and I need to repay him." "How?" Anthony asked. Louis stared at the note, his jaw set with determination. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I'll figure it out." He hung up the phone and immediately called his manager. "I need you to hire a private investigator," Louis said. "The best one you can find. I'm looking for someone named Raymond Chen. Last known location, Stevenage, England. Last contact, 1995. His manager started to ask questions, but Louis cut him off. "Just do it, please. And this is important." After the call ended, Louis sat back down on the floor. He held the envelope carefully in both hands, as if it were made of glass. Somewhere out there was a man who had changed his life. a stranger who had bet on an 8-year-old boy's dream with money he probably couldn't afford to give. Lewis Hamilton had won races in front of millions of people. He had stood on podiums around the world. He had wealth beyond imagination. But he had never properly thanked Raymond Chen. That was going to change. Whatever it took, however long the search lasted, Lewis would find the man who made everything possible. And when he did, he would finally repay a debt that had waited 30 years to be settled. The late afternoon sun shifted, casting long shadows across the room. Lewis carefully placed the envelope back in its box. But he knew he would never forget those 23 words, or the promise they contained. 1995, 29 years. Earlier, 8-year-old Lewis Hamilton pressed his face against the chain-link fence at Rye House Kart Circuit. His breath made little fog patches on the cold metal. Through the gaps, he watched other kids racing their karts around the track. Their machines were beautiful. Shiny paint, perfect tires, engines that purred like expensive cats. Lewis looked down at his own kart in the parking lot. His dad had patched the seat with duct tape. The engine coughed black smoke. The paint was scratched and faded, but it was his. And when he drove it, Lewis felt like he could fly. "Come on, son," Anthony called from their old van. "Time to get you registered for qualifying." Lewis ran over, his racing suit 2 sizes too big. His mom had bought it at a second-hand shop. She said he'd grow into it. Anthony zipped it up and ruffled Lewis's hair. "Remember what I told you?" Anthony asked. "Drive smart. Be smooth. The fast drivers aren't always the winners." "That's my boy." They rolled the cart to the track together. Other families had trucks and trailers, professional mechanics. Lewis had his dad, who'd watched YouTube videos to learn how to fix engines. The qualifying session started. Lewis climbed into his cart and pulled on his helmet. The moment the flag dropped, nothing else mattered. He flew around the track. His cart might have been old, but Lewis made it dance. He passed 2 kids in the first lap, 3 more in the second. When the checkered flag waved, Lewis had qualified third. Third! Out of 22 carts. Anthony lifted him out of the seat and hugged him so tight Lewis could barely breathe. "You did it! You were amazing!" But then came the sound that changed everything. Bang! Lewis's engine exploded in a cloud of black smoke. Oil sprayed across the track. Other drivers swerved to avoid the mess. Anthony's face went pale. They pushed the cart back to the van in silence. Anthony lifted the engine cover and looked inside. Lewis didn't need to be a mechanic to know it was bad. "Can you fix it, Dad?" Lewis asked quietly. Anthony didn't answer right away. He just stared at the destroyed engine, his jaw tight. "I'll try," he finally said. "I'll try." That night, Anthony sat at their small kitchen table in the Stevenage flat. Papers were spread everywhere. Bills, racing entry forms, bank statements. Lewis's mother, Carmen, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. "Anthony, we can't afford this," she said softly. "The mortgage is due next week. Lewis needs new school shoes. And now the cart needs a whole new engine?" "I know," Anthony whispered. "Maybe he should take a break from racing. Just for a few months. Just until—" "No." Anthony's voice was firm. "You didn't see him out there today, Carmen. He qualified third with equipment that should have put him last. He has something special. Real talent. I can feel it." "Talent doesn't pay bills." Anthony put his head in his hands. She was right. He knew she was right. He worked 3 jobs already. Train conductor during the day. IT contractor at night. Putting up advertisement signs on weekends. He barely slept. he barely saw his family. And it still wasn't enough. And he'd written letters to 17 racing sponsors. Every single one had sent back polite rejections. Some didn't even bother responding. Anthony knew why. A black kid from Stevenage, with no racing pedigree and no money? Nobody wanted to take that chance. But Anthony had seen something in Lewis's eyes when he raced. A fire, a hunger, a gift. He just needed help. Just a little help to keep the dream alive. The next morning, Anthony went to work exhausted. He checked tickets on the train, his mind a million miles away. "Rough night?" a familiar voice asked. Anthony looked up. Raymond Chen stood in the aisle, holding his usual motorsport magazine. Raymond rode this route every weekday. Always the 7:15 from Stevenage to London. Always reading about racing. They'd struck up a friendship over the past few months. Raymond was quiet, thoughtful, maybe 40 years old. He worked as an engineer for British Rail. He loved racing but had never done it himself. "You could say that," Anthony admitted. "Want to talk about it?" Raymond sat down in the empty seat across from Anthony. Something about Raymond's kind face made Anthony open up. He told him about Lewis qualifying third, about the engine exploding, about the bills and the mortgage, and the impossible math of keeping his son's dream alive. "I'm sorry," Anthony said, wiping his eyes. "I shouldn't dump this on you." "Don't apologize," Raymond said gently. "Your son has talent?" "Real talent. I know every parent thinks their kid is special. But Lewis, he's different. He sees things on the track that other kids don't see. He feels the cart like it's part of his body." Raymond nodded slowly. How much would a new engine cost?" "About 2,500 pounds for the parts we need. But I'm not asking you for money," Anthony added quickly. "I would never." "I know you're not asking," Raymond interrupted. "I'm offering." Anthony's mouth fell open. "Raymond, I can't accept that. That's too much. You don't even know Lewis." "I know you," Raymond said simply. "I've watched you work this route for months. You're kind to every passenger. You work harder than anyone I know, and you believe in your son. That's enough for me. But let me finish." Raymond pulled out his wallet and took out a business card. He wrote something on the back. "I don't have the money on me right now. Come to this address Saturday morning. I'll have it ready." Anthony stared at the card, his hands shaking. "Why would you do this?" Raymond was quiet for a long moment, and he looked out the train window at the countryside rushing past. "I have a daughter," he said finally. "Sophie. She's 7. She's sick right now, very sick. And watching her fight every day has taught me something important." "What's that?" "Life is short and uncertain. We can't control what happens to us, but we can control what we give to others. Your son has a gift. Maybe I can help him use it. Maybe that's my purpose. Maybe that's what I'll be remembered for." The train pulled into King's Cross Station. Raymond stood up and adjusted his coat. "Saturday morning, Anthony, 10 o'clock. And don't worry about paying me back. Just promise me one thing. Anything. When your son makes it big, and I believe he will, tell him to help someone else. Pay it forward. That's all I ask." Raymond walked off the train before Anthony could respond. Anthony sat there, staring at the business card, tears streaming down his face. That Saturday, Anthony went to Raymond's small house in Stevenage. Raymond answered the door looking tired. Anthony could hear coughing from inside, a child's cough. "Is Sophie okay?" Anthony asked. "She will be," Raymond said, but his eyes were sad. "She's strong." Raymond handed Anthony an envelope. Inside was 2,500 pounds in cash. Raymond, I can't. You can, and you will. For Louis, for his future. Anthony's voice broke. How can I ever thank you? You just did. Now go buy that engine, and tell Louis that someone he's never met believes in him. They shook hands. Anthony left quickly before he started crying again. He didn't know that the money in that envelope was Raymond's emergency savings. Money set aside for a last-chance experimental treatment in Germany if Sophie's condition got worse. He didn't know that Raymond had chosen to bet on a stranger's dream instead of holding on to his own safety net. He didn't know that Raymond's daughter had told her father, "Help him fly, Daddy. It's the right thing to do." All Anthony knew was that a good man had shown extraordinary kindness when kindness was needed most. The next month, Louis raced with his new engine parts. He won. Then he won again. And again. Scouts started noticing the fast kid from Stevenage. The trajectory toward Formula One had begun. And it all started with Raymond Chen's faith in a dream. Present day, 2024. Lewis Hamilton sat in his home office, staring at his laptop screen. 3 weeks had passed since he'd found the envelope. 3 weeks of searching, and still no answers. His phone buzzed, finally. "Mr. Hamilton, this is Mira Okonkwo. You hired me to find Raymond Chen." Lewis sat up straight. "Yes, did you find him?" Mira paused. "It's complicated. Can we meet in person? I'm in London. I can come to you." "I'll come to you," Lewis said immediately. "Send me the address." 2 hours later, Lewis walked into a small detective agency in East London. Mira Okonkwo was a sharp-looking woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a thick folder on her desk. "Thank you for seeing me," Lewis said, shaking her hand. "Mr. Hamilton, I have to be honest with you. Raymond Chen is not an easy man to find." Lewis's heart sank. "What do you mean?" Mira opened her folder. "I've been doing this work for 20 years. I've found people who didn't want to be found, people who changed their names, and people who disappeared on purpose. But Raymond Chen? He's like a ghost." She spread papers across her desk. Employment records, old phone books, public records. Raymond Chen worked as an engineer for British Rail from 1987 to 1998. Good employee. Never missed work. Lived in Stevenage. Then, in March 1998, he quit his job, moved out of his house, and vanished. "Vanished?" Lewis repeated. "People don't just vanish." "Most people don't," Mira agreed. "But Raymond did. No social media accounts, though that makes sense for his generation. No current phone number in any database. No voter registration. No utility bills in his name. Nothing." Lewis felt frustration rising in his chest. There has to be something. A forwarding address, a relative, anything. "I'm not done," Mira said. "I found something interesting. Raymond had a daughter named Sophie Chen, born 1988. She would be about 35 now." "My father mentioned Raymond had a daughter," Lewis said. "Do you know where she is?" "That's where it gets strange," Mira continued. "Sophie Chen has medical records at several London hospitals from 1995 to 1997. After that, the trail goes cold for her too. No recent records I can access legally." Lewis leaned forward. "What kind of medical records?" "I can't access the details without permission. Patient privacy laws. But the hospitals were oncology specialists." The word hit Lewis like a punch. Oncology. Cancer. "His daughter had cancer," Lewis said quietly. "In 1995. The same year he gave my father that money." Mira nodded. "It appears so." Lewis's mind raced. Raymond had a sick daughter. He gave away £2,500 when his own child was fighting cancer. The weight of that sacrifice suddenly felt enormous. "Keep looking," Lewis said. "Whatever it costs. I need to find him." That evening, Lewis called his father. "Dad, I need you to help me. The investigator can't find Raymond. But you knew him. You talked to him. There has to be something you remember." Anthony was quiet for a moment. "Lewis, it was 30 years ago. My memory isn't what it used to be. Please, Dad, try. Anything. Where did he like to go? What did he talk about? Did he have hobbies?" Anthony sighed. He loved racing, obviously. He always had those magazines. He was quiet, kind. He mentioned his daughter a lot, Sophie. He loved her more than anything in the world. "What about after you got the money? Did you stay in touch?" "For a while," Anthony said. "Maybe a year or two. But then Raymond stopped taking the train. I asked around. Someone said he'd moved away. I assumed he just wanted a fresh start somewhere else." "Why would he want a fresh start?" Anthony's voice dropped. "I don't know, son. But people who disappear usually have a reason." Lewis couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about Raymond Chen, a man who gave everything when he had nothing to give, a father watching his daughter suffer, an engineer who believed in an 8-year-old's dream. The next morning, Lewis drove to Stevenage. He hadn't been back to his old neighborhood in years. The flat where he'd grown up looked smaller than he remembered. The streets were the same, but different. He walked to the old train station. This was where his father had met Raymond, where a simple conversation had changed everything. An elderly woman sat on a bench, feeding pigeons. "Excuse me," Lewis said. "Did you grow up around here?" The woman looked up, squinting. "Born and raised. Why do you ask?" "I'm looking for someone who used to live here. Raymond Chen. He rode this train line in the 1990s. The woman's face brightened. "Raymond? Oh, I remember him. Lovely man. Always polite. Always said good morning." Lewis's pulse quickened. "Do you know where he went?" "No, dear. He left in 1998, I think. Maybe 1999. It was sad, really, after everything with his daughter." "What happened with his daughter?" The woman's expression turned somber. "She was sick. Cancer. Poor thing. Raymond spent everything he had trying to save her. Sold his car. Worked extra hours. I used to see him at the station looking exhausted. Just exhausted." "Did she survive?" Lewis asked, almost afraid of the answer. "I think so. I remember seeing her a few years later, looking healthy. But Raymond was gone by then. Someone said he moved to the countryside. Couldn't handle the memories, you know. This place probably reminded him of the hardest time in his life." Lewis thanked the woman and walked back to his car. He sat behind the wheel, thinking. Raymond's daughter had survived. That was good news. But Raymond had left because the memories hurt too much. He'd given away his emergency savings, worked himself to exhaustion, and then disappeared when it was all over. Lewis pulled out his phone and called Mira. "I need you to expand the search," he said. "Check countryside areas, small towns, places someone might go to escape painful memories." "That's a lot of territory, Mr. Hamilton." "I don't care. Check Cornwall, Devon, at Wales, Scotland, anywhere remote." Raymond loved racing, but he also needed peace. Find places where someone could live quietly. Lighthouses, small villages, anywhere a man might go to start over. "That could take weeks," Mira warned. "Then start now." 4 days later, Mira called back. "I found something. Maybe nothing, but it's interesting." "Tell me." "There's a man named R. Chen who works at a lighthouse in Cornwall. Started working there in 1998. Same year Raymond disappeared. The age would be about right. Early 70s now." Lewis's heart hammered. That's him. It has to be. I can't confirm it's the same person without more information. It's a common name, but— Give me the address, Lewis interrupted. I'm going to Cornwall. Mr. Hamilton, you should probably call first. I verify it's the right person before you drive all the way. No, Lewis said firmly. If this is him, I need to see him face to face. I need to look him in the eye when I thank him. He called his father next. Dad, I think I found him. Pack a bag. We're going to Cornwall tomorrow morning. Lewis, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The next morning, Lewis picked up his father in a rental car. They drove west, toward the coast. The roads got narrower. The towns got smaller. The ocean appeared on the horizon, gray and endless. Anthony was quiet for most of the drive. Lewis glanced at him several times. What are you thinking, Dad? Anthony stared out the window. I'm thinking about that day on the train when Raymond handed me that envelope. I almost said no. I almost refused. My pride almost got in the way. But you didn't refuse. No, because I saw something in his eyes. He wanted to help. He needed to help. Sometimes accepting kindness is just as important as giving it. They drove for another hour. The lighthouse appeared in the distance, a white tower on black cliffs, waves crashing below. Lewis parked the car. His hands were shaking. Ready? He asked his father. Anthony nodded. Let's go meet the man who changed our lives. They walked up the narrow path to the lighthouse. Seagulls cried overhead. The wind smelled like salt and possibility. Lewis knocked on the door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened. An elderly man stood in the doorway. White hair, weathered face, eyes that had seen both joy and sorrow. He looked at Lewis, then at Anthony. Recognition flickered across his face like lightning. Anthony, he whispered, Is that you? Hello, Raymond, Anthony said, his voice thick with emotion. It's been a long time. Raymond's eyes moved to Lewis. He studied the younger man's face for a moment. Then his eyes went wide. No, Raymond breathed. The little boy? The go-kart racer? I'm Lewis Hamilton, Lewis said quietly, and I'm here because of you. Raymond Chen stumbled backward, gripping the doorframe for support. His face had gone pale. His hands trembled. You can't be, he whispered. The little boy who raced go-karts. That was you. That was me, Lewis confirmed. Raymond's legs seemed to give out. He collapsed into a wooden chair by the door, his breath coming in short gasps. Anthony rushed forward, kneeling beside him. Are you all right? Anthony asked, concerned. Raymond waved his hand. I'm fine. Just shocked. Lewis Hamilton, the Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, and you're standing at my door. Can we come in? Lewis asked gently. We have a lot to talk about. Raymond nodded, still looking dazed. He led them into the small lighthouse keeper's cottage. The interior was simple but clean. Books lined the walls. A small kitchen in one corner. Windows that looked out at the endless ocean. They sat at a worn wooden table. Raymond made tea with shaking hands. Nobody spoke until the cups were filled. I don't understand, Raymond finally said. How did you find me? Why did you find me? Lewis pulled out the yellowed envelope and placed it on the table. Raymond stared at it. His eyes filled with tears. I forgot about that note, he said softly. I wrote it so long ago. I found it 3 weeks ago, Lewis explained. I was sorting through old family boxes. When I saw it, I knew I had to find you. I had to thank you properly. And I had to understand why you helped us. Raymond picked up the envelope with careful hands. "You want to know why I gave your father money when I was a complete stranger?" "Yes," Louis said. "Please." Raymond was quiet for a long time. He stared out the window at the waves. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, like he was traveling back through time. "I had a daughter," he began. "Sophie. She was the light of my life. Smart, kind, beautiful. In 1995, she was 7 years old." Anthony and Louis exchanged glances. They knew what was coming. That February, Sophie got sick, really sick. But we took her to the hospital. They ran tests. Raymond's voice cracked. "Leukemia. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. My 7-year-old daughter had cancer." Louis felt his throat tighten. The doctors said she needed treatment immediately. Chemotherapy, maybe radiation. The NHS would cover the standard treatment. But there was an experimental program in Germany, a clinical trial. The doctors said it had better success rates, higher survival chances, but it cost money. A lot of money. Raymond took a sip of tea, his hands still shaking. "I sold my car. I worked double shifts. My wife cleaned houses on weekends. We saved every penny. By March, we had £2,500 set aside. It wasn't enough for Germany, but it was our emergency fund, our safety net." "And you gave it to my father," Louis said quietly. "Yes." Raymond looked directly at Louis. "I met your father on the train. He was always kind to everyone, always had a smile, even when he looked exhausted. We talked about racing. He told me about you, about your talent, about how hard he was working to give you a chance." Raymond paused, his eyes distant with memory. One day, he looked particularly tired, defeated. I asked what was wrong. He told me about your engine exploding, about needing parts, about the sponsors who rejected you. He never asked for money, never hinted at it, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. "So you decided to help," Anthony said. "Not right away," Raymond admitted. "I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about your father's face, about a talented boy who might never get his chance because of money. And I thought about Sophie." Louis leaned forward. "What about Sophie?" "I asked her what she thought I'd be remembered for," Raymond said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "She was 7 years old and fighting for her life, and she asked me such a deep question. I told her I was just an engineer. Nothing special, nothing memorable." Raymond pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his eyes. "Sophie looked at me with those wise eyes and said, 'Daddy, you can help people. That's what you'll be remembered for.' Then she asked about the boy on the train, the racer. I'd mentioned you to her, Louis. She asked if you were good. I said your father thought you were special." The cottage was silent except for the sound of waves crashing outside. Sophie said, "Help him fly, Daddy. It's the right thing to do." Those were her exact words, to help him fly. Louis felt tears running down his own face now. The next morning, I took our emergency savings, the £2,500, and I put it in that envelope. My wife was terrified. She asked what would happen if Sophie's condition got worse, if we needed that money for the German treatment. I told her I believed Sophie would survive with standard treatment, and I believed that helping you was what we were meant to do. But it was such a risk, Anthony said, his voice breaking. Your daughter's life was already in God's hands, Raymond interrupted gently. The German treatment might have worked, or it might not have. But giving a talented boy a chance? That was certain. That was real. That was something I could do that would definitely make a difference. Louis couldn't speak. The magnitude of Raymond's sacrifice overwhelmed him. Did Sophie survive?" he finally managed to ask. Raymond's face broke into the first smile they'd seen. Yes, she did. The standard treatment worked. She went into remission after 18 months. She's been cancer-free for 27 years now. "Thank God," Anthony breathed. "But the treatment left us in debt," Raymond continued. "Medical bills, lost work time, everything we'd saved was gone. I worked myself to exhaustion trying to pay it all back. And after Sophie recovered, I realized I couldn't stay in Stevenage anymore." "Why not?" Lewis asked. "Too many memories," Raymond said simply. "Every street corner reminded me of the worst time in my life. The hospital visits, the fear, the uncertainty. I loved that town, but I needed peace. I needed to start over somewhere quiet." "So you came here," Lewis said. "So I came here. 1998. I got a job as a lighthouse keeper. It's peaceful, solitary. I watch the ocean. I read books. I think about my life. And I wondered sometimes about the little boy I helped. But I never knew if the money made a difference. I never knew if you kept racing." Raymond looked directly at Lewis. "I never knew you became Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, one of the greatest drivers in Formula One history. I never knew that my 2,500 pounds helped create that." Lewis reached across the table and took Raymond's weathered hand. "You didn't just help create a racing career," Lewis said. "You taught me the most important lesson I've ever learned. That sometimes the greatest thing you can do is believe in someone when nobody else will. And that real wealth isn't what you keep. It's what you give when giving costs you everything." Raymond squeezed Lewis's hand. Fresh tears rolled down his cheeks. "Your daughter told you to help me fly," Lewis continued. "Well, I flew, Raymond. I flew higher and farther than I ever imagined. And it started with you, with your faith, with your sacrifice." Anthony joined them, putting his hand on top of theirs. "You changed our lives," Anthony said. "You saved my son's dream when I couldn't save it myself. How can we ever repay you?" Raymond shook his head. "I told you in that note. No payback needed. Just pay it forward. Help someone else." "We will," Lewis promised. "But first, I need you to understand something. That money you gave us, it wasn't just 2,500 pounds. It was hope. It was belief. It was proof that good people exist in the world. And that deserves to be recognized?" "I don't need recognition," Raymond protested. "I just did what felt right." "I know," Lewis said, "but I need to do what feels right too. And what feels right is making sure your sacrifice creates ripples that go far beyond me. That your choice to believe in a stranger's dream keeps helping people forever." Raymond looked confused. "What do you mean?" Lewis smiled. "I mean, I've spent 3 weeks thinking about how to repay you. And I finally figured it out. But I can't tell you yet. First, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to call Sophie. I need to meet her. And I need you both to come with me tomorrow. There's something I want to show you." Raymond hesitated. "Lewis, I'm an old man. I live a simple life. I don't need—" "Please," Lewis interrupted. "Just trust me." "Ah, the way you trusted me 30 years ago. Can you do that?" Raymond studied Lewis's face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, I'll call Sophie." That evening, Raymond called his daughter. Lewis and Anthony stayed in a small inn nearby. Lewis couldn't sleep. Tomorrow, he would reveal how he planned to repay Raymond. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, a car pulled up outside the lighthouse. A woman stepped out. She was in her mid-30s, with kind eyes and her father's gentle smile. "Sophie?" Louis asked. "You're Lewis Hamilton," she said, stunned. "My father called me, but I didn't believe him." "Believe him," Louis said, shaking her hand. "And thank you for coming. Your father's sacrifice changed my life, but I've learned it was your idea. You told him to help me fly." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I was 7. I just wanted my dad to do something good. I didn't know it would lead to this." "It led to everything," Louis said. "Now please, both of you, come with me. I have something to show you." They drove together to a nearby town. Louis led them to a large community center he'd rented for the day. Inside, several people waited. Lawyers, architects, medical professionals. A banner hung on the wall, but it was covered with a sheet. "What is this?" Raymond asked, bewildered. Louis stood in front of the covered banner. His heart pounded. This was it, the moment he'd been planning for weeks. "Raymond, you gave me £2,500 when you had nothing to give. You chose my dream over your security. You taught me that the greatest gift isn't money, it's belief. So I'm not going to repay you with money, and I'm going to repay you with something much bigger." He pulled the sheet away from the banner. Raymond and Sophie gasped. The banner read, "The Raymond Chen Legacy Project." "What is this?" Raymond whispered. Louis smiled. "This is how your sacrifice lives forever. And it starts right now." Raymond stared at the banner, his mouth open. Sophie clutched her father's arm, tears already streaming down her face. "I don't understand," Raymond said. "What is this?" Louis gestured to the chairs set up in the room. "Please, sit down, both of you. Let me explain everything." They sat. Anthony stood beside Louis, beaming with pride. Louis took a deep breath. "For 3 weeks, I've been trying to figure out how to repay you. At first, I thought about money, a check, a wire transfer, something simple. But that felt wrong. You didn't give us money. You gave us belief. You gave us hope when hope was impossible." Raymond started to speak, but Louis held up his hand gently. "Then I thought about what you told my father in that note. Pay it forward when you can. That's what you asked for, not repayment. Just kindness passed along to others. So I asked myself, how do I honor your sacrifice in a way that creates endless ripples? How do I make sure what you did in 1995 keeps helping people forever?" Louis walked to a table where folders were stacked. He picked one up. "This is how." He opened the folder and showed them the first page. Sophie gasped. Raymond's hands flew to his mouth. "The Raymond Chen Racing Scholarship," Louis read. "A fully funded program for underprivileged young racers from any background, any country, any circumstance. Each year, 10 children will receive £50,000 each to pursue their racing dreams." Raymond shook his head in disbelief. "Louis, that's £500,000 every year." "That's right," Louis confirmed. "Adjusted for inflation from your original £2,500. 10 kids. Every year. Forever. I've established an endowment that will fund this scholarship in perpetuity." Sophie covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Anthony put his arm around Raymond's shoulders. "But it's not just money," Louis continued. "Each scholarship includes mentorship, equipment support, and connections to racing programs. These kids will get what I got, a real chance. Not because they're rich, not because they have connections, but because they have talent, and someone believes in them." Louis pulled out another sheet of paper from the folder. "So the first recipient has already been selected. Her name is Aisha Patel. She's 9 years old from Birmingham. Her mother works 4 jobs. Aisha races in local kart leagues with equipment held together by hope and duct tape. Sound familiar? Raymond laughed through his tears. Very familiar. Aisha will receive her first scholarship payment next month. She'll have new equipment, proper training, and a chance to compete at the national level. And when she wins, because I believe she will, she'll know that her opportunity came from you, Raymond. From a man who believed in a stranger's dream 30 years ago. Louis set down the first folder and picked up another one. But that's just the beginning. Raymond looked up, confused. There's more? Much more, Louis said. Raymond, I learned that Sophie survived leukemia, and that she fought through treatment and won. That's a miracle. But I also learned that not every family has that happy ending. Not every child survives. Not every parent has the support they need during the darkest time of their life. He opened the second folder. The Sophie Chen Memorial Fund, Louis read. A donation of £500,000 to Bristol Children's Hospital Oncology Unit. Sophie's hands flew to her chest. What? It's not a memorial because you died, Louis explained quickly. It's a memorial to your fight, your courage, your survival. This fund will build a new family support center at the hospital, a place where parents can rest, get counseling, find financial planning assistance, and simply breathe when everything feels impossible. Raymond stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He walked to the window, his shoulders shaking. Raymond, Anthony said gently. I'm all right, Raymond managed. I never imagined. Sophie, did you hear that? They're building something in your name. Sophie joined her father at the window. They held each other, crying. Louis gave them a moment before continuing. The center will have comfortable rooms where families can stay overnight near their children. It will offer free counseling services, financial advisors who can help navigate medical bills and insurance, support groups where parents can share their fears and hopes, with others who understand. He paused, letting that sink in. It will be called the Sophie Chen Family Hope Center. Because that's what you and your father gave my family, Sophie. Hope, when hope seemed gone. Sophie turned from the window. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. My father always said I told him to help you fly, she said. I don't remember saying that. I was so young. But if I did, I'm glad. I'm so glad. You did more than help me fly, Louis said. You taught your father that the right choice is often the hardest choice. That sometimes love means giving everything, even when you're scared. That's the kind of wisdom that changes the world. Anthony walked over and handed Raymond a handkerchief. Raymond wiped his eyes and returned to his seat. Is that everything? Raymond asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. Louis smiled. No. There's one more thing, the biggest thing. He picked up the third and final folder. This one was thicker than the others. Raymond, you came to this lighthouse in 1998 to find peace, to escape painful memories. Oh, you've lived here for 26 years in quiet solitude. But I think it's time for a new purpose, a new kind of peace. Louis opened the folder and spread architectural drawings across the table. I've purchased this lighthouse and the surrounding 15 acres of land. Raymond's eyes went wide. You what? I purchased it from the Maritime Authority last week. They were planning to automate it anyway. Now it's mine, but I'm not keeping it. I don't understand, Raymond said. Louis pointed to the drawings. I'm transforming it into the Chen Family Retreat, a free healing center for families with children battling cancer. The room went completely silent. Sophie gripped her father's hand. The lighthouse will become housing for 12 families at a time, Lewis explained, pointing to the architectural plans. So we'll renovate the keeper's cottage into a main gathering space. We'll build small cabins on the property for privacy. Families can stay for a week, completely free. No cost, no stress, just peace. Raymond stared at the drawings, unable to speak. We'll provide meals, counseling, activities for healthy siblings, and connections to medical resources, Lewis continued. But more than that, we'll provide what you came here looking for: peace, the sound of the ocean, the sight of the lighthouse beam cutting through darkness, a reminder that even in the longest night, there's always light. Sophie was crying so hard she could barely breathe. Anthony had tears running down his face too. "And Raymond," Lewis said, kneeling in front of the older man, "I want you and Sophie to run it. Together. You'll oversee the facility. Sophie, with your medical background, can coordinate with hospitals and oncology centers. You'll be the heart of this place. You'll give families what you needed back in 1995: hope, support, and the knowledge that they're not alone." Raymond's weathered face crumpled. He pulled Lewis into a tight hug, sobbing into his shoulder. "I gave you 2,500 pounds, Raymond choked out. "Just 2,500 pounds. And you're giving me this?" Lewis hugged him back. "You gave me everything. You gave me my career, my purpose, my understanding of what really matters. This isn't repayment, Raymond. This is multiplication. You planted a seed in 1995. I'm just helping it grow into a forest." They held each other for a long time. Finally, Raymond pulled back and looked Lewis in the eyes. "Why are you doing all this?" he asked. "The scholarship, I understand. The hospital donation makes sense. But this? The retreat center? That's not just paying it forward. That's your life's savings." "No," Lewis corrected gently. "That's your legacy. You gave when you had nothing to give. You chose my dream over your security. You bet everything on an 8-year-old boy from Stevenage. Now, I'm betting on you. I'm betting that your story, your sacrifice, deserves to help thousands of families, not just one." Sophie joined the embrace. 3 people, connected by an act of faith from 1995, holding each other in a community center in Cornwall. "I have one condition," Lewis said, pulling back. "Anything," Raymond said immediately. "The first family arrives next month. They're a mother and her 6-year-old son fighting lymphoma. I want you to greet them personally. I want you to tell them your story. I tell them about Sophie. Tell them about believing in strangers. Tell them that darkness doesn't last forever." Raymond nodded, unable to speak. Lewis stood and addressed everyone in the room, the lawyers, architects, and medical professionals who'd been watching quietly. "This project launches immediately. We have 4 weeks to complete the first phase of renovations. The Chen family retreat opens on April 15th. I want it perfect. These families deserve perfect." The team nodded and began gathering their materials. Contracts were signed, plans were approved. The dream was becoming real. As people filed out, Raymond sat at the table, staring at the architectural drawings of his lighthouse transformed into a healing center. "I was just a man who made a choice," he said quietly. Lewis sat beside him. "You were the man who changed my life. And now, together, we'll change thousands more." Anthony joined them, putting his hand on Raymond's shoulder. "You told me to pay it forward," Anthony said. "You told me that when Lewis made it big, he should help someone else. Well, he made it big, and he's helping everyone." Raymond looked at Lewis with wonder. how did you turn out so good? So generous? I learned from you, Louis said simply. You taught me that real wealth isn't measured in trophies or bank accounts. It's measured in lives touched, dreams enabled, hope restored. You gave me that lesson in 1995. I'm just finally smart enough to use it. Sophie stood behind her father's chair, her hands on his shoulders. Daddy, do you remember what you told me when I was 7? You said you wanted to be remembered for something good. Raymond nodded, tears flowing again. So this is it, Sophie said. This is what you'll be remembered for. Not just helping Louis, but creating a place where families like ours can find peace, where children fighting for their lives can play by the ocean, where parents can rest and hope. This is your legacy. Raymond stood and walked to the window. The ocean stretched endlessly before him, the same view he'd watched for 26 years. But somehow it looked different now, brighter, full of possibility. When do we start? He asked, turning back to Louis. Louis grinned. We already have. Welcome to the next chapter, Raymond. The chapter where your sacrifice becomes everyone's salvation. The sun was setting over the Cornwall coast, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Louis stood with Raymond at the edge of the cliff, out looking down at the waves crashing against the black rocks below. I need to show you something else, Louis said. Something I haven't told anyone yet. Raymond turned to him, curious. There's more? There's always more, Louis smiled. Walk with me. They followed the narrow path along the cliff edge. The lighthouse beam had just started its rotation, sweeping across the darkening ocean. Anthony and Sophie walked behind them, talking quietly. Louis led them to a flat clearing about 200 yards from the lighthouse. Construction equipment was already parked there. Excavators, cement mixers, portable offices. What's all this? Raymond asked. Louis pulled out his phone and opened an architectural rendering. He handed it to Raymond. The image showed a beautiful modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the ocean. The children played in a garden. Families sat on benches watching the sunset. The lighthouse stood proudly in the background. This is the Chen family retreat main building, Louis explained. 5,000 square feet. Common areas where families can gather. A library. A playroom for children. A kitchen where they can cook together. And a meditation room where parents can sit and breathe and remember they're human beings, not just caregivers. Raymond zoomed in on the image, his hands trembling slightly. It's beautiful, he whispered. It will be ready in 6 months, Louis continued. But the temporary facilities open next month. We're converting the existing buildings first, so families can start coming immediately. The permanent structure comes after. Sophie joined them, looking at the phone over her father's shoulder. Louis, this must cost millions, she said. $5 million for construction, Louis confirmed. Another $3 million in the endowment to fund operations forever. Staff salaries, food, activities, medical liaisons, everything. £8 million, Raymond breathed. For my lighthouse. For your legacy, Louis corrected. Money is just paper, Raymond. But what you did, choosing hope over fear, choosing generosity over security, that's priceless. I'm just giving it the platform it deserves. They stood in silence, watching the construction equipment as it rested in the fading light. Tomorrow, work would begin. Tomorrow, the transformation would start. Can I ask you something? Raymond said quietly. Anything. Why now? You've been successful for years. You're a world champion many times over. But why did you wait until now to find me? Louis was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because I wasn't ready, he said honestly. For years, I thought success meant winning races, collecting trophies, breaking records. I worked so hard to prove I belonged in Formula One, to show that a black kid from Stevenage could compete with anyone. He paused, looking out at the ocean. But this past year, something changed. I started asking myself what I really wanted to be remembered for. The championships are wonderful. The records matter. But they're not enough. They're not what makes life meaningful. What makes life meaningful? Sophie asked. This, Lewis said, gesturing to the lighthouse and the land around them. Connection. Gratitude. Making sure the good that was done for me creates good for others. I found your father's note, and suddenly I understood. My entire career was built on a stranger's faith. Everything I achieved started with your dad's sacrifice. How could I not honor that? Raymond put his hand on Lewis's shoulder. You've already honored it. You became a champion. You inspired millions of people. You broke barriers. That was enough. No, Lewis said firmly, but gently. It wasn't, because none of those people know about you. They don't know about your sacrifice. They don't know about Sophie telling you to help me fly. They don't know that the money you gave came from your emergency savings while your daughter fought cancer. Lewis turned to face Raymond directly. The world thinks I made it on talent and hard work alone. But that's not true. I made it because a good man believed in me. And that man deserves to be celebrated. Your story deserves to be told. I don't want fame, Raymond protested. I never did this for recognition. I know, Lewis said. That's exactly why you deserve it. The people who want recognition least are usually the ones who deserve it most. Anthony stepped forward, joining the conversation. Raymond, do you remember what you told me on the train? You said you wanted to be remembered for something. You said watching Sophie fight taught you that life is short and uncertain. You wanted your life to matter. Raymond nodded slowly. It matters, Anthony continued, his voice thick with emotion. It matters more than you'll ever know. You didn't just help my son. You taught him how to be a man, how to be generous, how to believe in others even when it's risky. Every good thing Lewis does traces back to you. Sophie wiped tears from her eyes. Dad, I never knew the full story. You told me you helped a boy with racing, but you never told me you gave him your emergency savings. You never told me you chose his dream over our safety. I couldn't tell you, Raymond said. You were just a child. And later, when you were older, it felt like bragging. Like I was trying to take credit for something that wasn't mine to take credit for. But it is yours, Lewis insisted. The scholarship program will tell your story. The hospital center will tell Sophie's story. And this retreat, this beautiful place, will tell both your stories to every family that comes through. They'll know that healing is possible, that generosity creates miracles, and that one person's choice can change the entire world. The lighthouse beams swept across them, illuminating their faces for a brief moment before moving on. There's one more thing, Lewis said. Something I need to ask you, Raymond. What is it? Lewis pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Not a yellowed old envelope from 1995, but a new one. Clean, white, sealed. Open it, Lewis said. Raymond took the envelope with shaking hands. He opened it carefully and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a check, made out to Raymond Chen. The amount line read, £2,500. Raymond looked up, confused. I don't understand. That's your money back, Lewis said. The exact amount you gave my father in 1995. The debt is paid. The original transaction is complete. Raymond tried to hand it back. Lewis, no, I told your father no payback was needed. I meant it." "I know you did," Louis said, not taking the check. "But keep reading." Raymond looked back at the paper. Below the check, there was a handwritten note in Louis's writing. "Dear Raymond, this check repays your £2,500 from 1995. The debt is settled. But the scholarship, the hospital donation, and the retreat center? Those aren't repayment. Those are gratitude. Those are my choice, freely given, inspired by your example. You taught me to pay it forward. I'm paying it forward, with love and respect, Lewis Hamilton." Raymond read the note 3 times. Then he carefully folded the check and put it back in the envelope. "I'll cash this," he said quietly, "and I'll donate it to the first family that comes to the retreat. They'll need money for gas, for food, for whatever they're facing. Your £2,500 will help them, just like my £2,500 helped you." Louis felt tears prick his eyes. Of course Raymond would do that. Of course he'd immediately give it away. "You're a good man, Raymond Chen," Louis said. "The world needs to know that." "The world doesn't need to know anything about me," Raymond replied. "But if my story helps even one family feel less alone, then tell it. Tell it as many times as you need to." Sophie hugged her father tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Dad. I always have been. But now, the whole world will be proud of you, too." They stood together as the last light faded from the sky. The lighthouse beam rotated faithfully, as it had for 100 years. But now it would mean something new. Now it would be a beacon of hope for families in their darkest hour. "When does the first family arrive?" Raymond asked. 4 weeks, Louis said. "A mother named Jennifer Martin and her son Tommy. He's 6. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The same type Sophie had." Raymond's breath caught. "The same type." "Yes, Jennifer is divorced, working 2 jobs. Tommy's father isn't involved. She's terrified and exhausted and running out of hope. Sound familiar?" "Very familiar," Raymond said softly. "You'll meet them when they arrive," Louis continued. "You'll show them around. You'll tell them about Sophie. You'll show them that survival is possible, that miracles happen, that strangers become family." "I can do that," Raymond said, his voice stronger now. "I want to do that." "Good," Louis smiled, "because there will be many more after Jennifer and Tommy. The retreat can host 12 families at a time. We'll rotate them every week. That's over 600 families per year. 600 families who will know your name, who will know your story, who will be blessed by your choice from 1995. The number was overwhelming. 600 families. Every year. Forever. "Louis," Raymond said, turning to face the younger man fully, "I gave you £2,500 because it felt like the right thing to do. I never expected anything in return. I certainly never expected this. I know, but I need you to understand something. You don't owe me anything. You never did. You took my small gift and turned it into something extraordinary through your own talent, your own work, your own determination. I just opened a door. You walked through it and conquered the world." Louis shook his head. "You didn't just open a door. You built the door when there was only a wall. You created possibility where none existed. Without you, I never would have gotten to the next race. Never would have been noticed by scouts. Never would have made it to Formula One. Everything traces back to you." "Then I'm glad," Raymond said simply. "I'm glad I could help. And I'm glad you're using your success to help others. That's all I ever wanted. That's what pay it forward means." Anthony stepped between them, putting one hand on Raymond's shoulder and one on Louis's. "You're both right," he said. "Raymond, you created the opportunity. Louis, you seized it and multiplied it. And now together, you're creating opportunities for thousands of others. That's not repayment. That's not even gratitude. That's something bigger. That's legacy." The four of them stood in a circle: Raymond, Sophie, Anthony, and Louis. The four people connected by a choice made 30 years ago. Four people about to change countless lives. "When do we tell people?" Sophie asked. "When does this become public?" Louis smiled. "The official announcement happens next week. Press conference, media coverage, the whole thing. But tonight? Tonight it's just us. Just the people who matter most." He pulled out his phone and held it up. "Let me take a picture. The four of us. Here at the lighthouse. The beginning of everything." They posed together, the lighthouse behind them, the ocean stretching endlessly before them. Louis set the timer and ran to join them. The phone clicked. The image captured something beautiful. An old man with white hair and a weathered face, smiling through tears. His daughter beside him, radiant with joy. A father and son who'd struggled together and triumphed together. And behind them, a lighthouse that would soon become a symbol of hope. Louis looked at the photo and knew it would hang in the Chen family retreat forever. The origin story. The moment when a 30-year-old debt was finally repaid. Not with money, but with love, purpose, and endless possibility. "What happens now?" Raymond asked. Louis put his arm around the older man's shoulders. "Now we get to work. Now we build something beautiful. Now we make sure your choice in 1995 echoes through eternity. Now we help families find hope when hope seems impossible. Now we prove that one person's faith can change everything." The lighthouse beam swept across them again, lighting their faces with its eternal glow. "Now," Louis said quietly, "we help people fly." 1 month later, to Jennifer Martin and her 6-year-old son Tommy arrived at the Chen family retreat. Raymond greeted them at the door, just as he'd promised. He showed them to their cabin. He told them about Sophie. He told them about hope. Tommy played on the beach while his mother cried tears of relief in Raymond's arms. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. The lighthouse beam rotated overhead, guiding ships safely home. And in that beam of light, Raymond Chen's legacy lived on, forever multiplying, forever giving, forever proving that the greatest gift anyone can give is believing in someone else's dream. Lewis Hamilton had repaid his debt, but more than that, he'd transformed one man's sacrifice into an eternal river of hope. And it all started with £2,500 and a note that said, "Pay it forward when you can." If this story touched your heart, we want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? What part of Raymond and Louis's story moved you the most? And if you believe in spreading kindness like Raymond Chen did, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more inspiring stories that prove good people still exist in this world. There's another incredible story waiting for you right now. Click on the video appearing on your screen. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for watching. Now go out there and pay it forward.